Good morning, everybody. As co-host, it is my pleasure to welcome all of our attendees today. You are coming in from different places, Canada, United States, India, a number of other places as well. So we would like to extend a huge welcome and thank you for being here. My first quick shout out is to Shabazz and his wonderful team for their marketing, their outreach, their organization for this event. There's a lot of hard work that goes on behind the scenes to put on an event like this. So I do want to extend my enormous thanks to Shabazz and his group. I want to thank Tim Franz and St. John Fisher University for their support of today and also their work in organizing things. And I'd also like to thank in advance our wonderful panelists. We have assembled today here a terrific group of experts with global experience, deep expertise, many books and articles and publications and podcasts and all that wonderful stuff. And they will today share with you their insights, their ideas, and their advice. So without further delay, let me pass the baton on to Shabazz, our MC and our facilitator today.
Thank you so much, Seth. Really excited for this one. And my sincere gratitude to Silver Consulting Inc. for sponsoring this event, our co-sponsors, St. John Fisher University and Innovation Global. So this is not going to be a classical, just one-way communication wherein I just ask questions to the panel and the panelists do respond. We are going to also engage the audience. So it's my kind request to audience to engage as much as they can. If they have any questions in between which are relevant, feel free to raise your hand. In addition to that, if you have any relevant experiences that you want to share with the group, feel free to raise your hand and we'll unmute you, and we'd love to hear from you as well. Just one quick note over here. We have some excellent giveaways for the participants. We have two books, Meaningful Partnership, two copies of Meaningful Partnership at a Workplace from Dr. Seth Silver and Dr. Tim Franz. So, we'll be declaring the winners in the end of the session. We have Dr. Kristen Redmond, who's offering coaching session. So we'll be selecting two participants and you can schedule time later. And in addition to that, we have Dr. Bill Rothwell. He will be providing us with the market research report that they have prepared on the Excel. Also, we have Harjeet, who will be really delighted to offer a 15% off on his publication. So, first and foremost, before I get into the intro, really big thanks to you, panelists, the participants, and the organizers of the event. Without further ado, let me introduce our esteemed panel. So here we have Dr. William Rothwell. So Dr. William Rothwell is professor at Penn State University. He's an international consultant serving Fortune 500 clients across 35 nations and government entities. So he is an author of 300 plus books on HR topics. That's pretty insane. I mean, we were just talking about this before the session, and you know, I'm really not sure if in my entire lifetime I would have had read 300 books start to end, right? So kudos to you, Dr. Bill, and we're really looking forward to learn a lot from you. Next, we have Dr. Partha Ghosh, the living legend. He is the founder of the Partha Ghosh Leadership Academy at IIT Kharagpur. And he is a former McKinsey partner, and he brings 4 decades of experience. I mean, uh, I'm really humbled to have these kind of folks on my panel. Dr. Partha Ghosh, thank you so much for joining this panel, and all of us over here are really looking forward to learn a lot from you. Next on the panel, we have Dr. Kristen Redmond. Dr. Kristen Redmond is an HR leader. She's a researcher. She's a coach. She's a Fleming College's Equity and Inclusion Director, Trent University professor, and her areas of focus are on leadership, equity, and psychological safety. So she will share insights on fostering equity, focus, psychological safety, and advancing inclusive leadership practices in times of uncertainty. Dr. Kristen Redmond, thank you so much for joining us on the panel here. We really look forward to learn from you as well. Next on the panel, we have is Harjeet Khanduja. So Harjeet, he is one of my favorite when it comes to LinkedIn. He's known as Aki Lakshman of business. And if I'm not mistaken, Harjeet, 200,000 plus followers on LinkedIn. Is that correct? Correct me if I'm wrong. Uh, so I mean, we really love your short stories, Jay and Raj, and I'm really looking forward to hear more of those stories in this panel. So just to give you a quick background about him, he is senior vice president of HR at Reliance Jio. So today, Harjeet, we look forward to hear from you on the insights on how Gen AI will impact the HR function. So again, thank you, Harjeet, for joining this panel. Next, we have Dr. Seth Silver. So Dr. Seth Silver is principal of Silver Consulting Inc. He is an expert in HR and OD leadership. He's a Fortune 500 consultant, and he's also the author of Meaningful Partnership at Work. If I'm not mistaken, he also has another book which is in pipeline. We'll get to hear about it very soon. So Seth, welcome to the panel, and thank you for all the thank you first of all for bringing all the experts together, and thank you for again bringing this idea in the first place. I know we did this back in 2021, and I'm really excited for this event. So next we have is Dr. Tim France. Dr. Tim France is St. John Fisher's professor and chair of psychology. He's an industrial psychologist. He's a team building expert. He's a leadership consultant, and he is the author of Meaningful Partnership at Work. So he brings expertise in leadership, organizational behavior, and consulting. And Tim, we look forward to learn a lot from you in this panel. So before we start, a quick round of applause, a short round of applause from our desk for everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining the panel. I'm really excited. As we were just discussing ago, we have people from all over the globe. We have people from United States, we have people from Canada, we have people from India, we have people from Netherlands, France, Austria. So thank you once again for the overwhelming support from the audience. So without further ado, let us get into the Q&A. And I'll start with Dr. Partha Ghosh. So, Partha, I know that you've seen throughout your career, you have seen different scenarios. Like you have seen the early tech era, you've seen the tech bubble, you've seen the global financial crisis, you've seen the COVID, right? So, could you help us understand how has the concept of leadership evolved in response to the challenges posed by these rapidly changing economic climates? And if we were to talk about very recent disruptions like Gen AI.
Sure. Thank you very much first. Thanks to all my panelists and audience for giving us the opportunity to share a few of the thoughts which I've humbly observed over the last 4 decades. No, I think it's changed significantly because when I started my career in New York City, it was basically we were seeing the last leg of the Industrial Revolution 2.0, 3.0, which basically meant discipline, meant efficiency, the command and control structure at work, military model at work. And that was kind of the principle that the young people come and fit into the organizational culture. But as we have evolved from 2.0 to through 3.0, 4.0, now we are, I call it knowledge revolution 1.0 or 2.0 even with Gen AI. Obviously, the way we connect with people has to change. The military model is obviously outdated. Command and control structures are outdated. We have to think of a new model of networking where you not only empower sounds like I have the power, I'm empowering, but literally motivate people at the edges. And in the process, you look at every individual as a possible leader. So leadership, as we have thought about in the past, as someone at the top who is commanding, has to go. And what we have to evolve in the future is that everyone is a problem solver, everyone is looking for new frontiers, everyone is taking responsibility of this domain and providing a new kind of paradigm, if you will, a new kind of thinking, exploring new frontiers. But I must say it's very unfortunate, though many books have been written on HR, thanks to Dr. Rothwell, we have always talked about that people are our assets, but when it comes to economic shrinkages, people are the ones who are treated like commodities. So I think we have not made much progress as to how companies have to behave because they are treated as commodities. The people who did not make the decision, they are the ones who end up suffering, people at the base of the pyramid. And I think that is where I feel highly compromised. You know, people like Dr. Rothwell and many others. I still remember the book that I was very much involved in, McKinsey in Search of Excellence. We continuously reminded people that you have to treat people as the most important assets. But I feel we are treating people as commodities. And the final point I like to make, where I feel the command and control structure is still at work, though we are talking about new organizational paradigms, which I can discuss later, is the gap between the salaries of CEOs and the incoming salary. When I joined the professional world, the ratio of the CEO salary and the professional entering used to be about 25 to 1. Today it is almost reaching 300 to 1. So it says that we have even become more hierarchical and more transactional and more greedy at the top when we are talking about helping people to become powerful at the base of the pyramid, empowering young people. So I blame myself because I have not been able to inspire CEOs of many companies, though I've been a consultant. And I'm sure Professor Rothwell, you must feel the same way. I've been written 400 books on HR. How come companies, that's the real question, are not being able to make the necessary shift the world is looking for? So with that, that's a quick input, Shavaz, to a very good question. I can go on, but we have distinguished panelists. I'm sure they would reflect on it. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, that was really interesting. The Industrial 2.0, 3.0, as people, we should see people assets and they have become just commodities. I would go to Harjeet. And Harjeet, do you have anything to add to what Dr. Partha Ghosh said?
Okay, I will. Thank you for giving this opportunity to me. And I will try to add a different perspective. Look, what happens is, okay, let me start with a story. So during COVID, there was a guy called Prasad. So he used to live nearby and he was 70 years old. He was my friend and he was retired. He was getting his pension. Now, when you are getting your pension, you actually have to go to the government office, the pension office, and declare that I am alive, then only you get pension. So when COVID was there, he was worried, how will I go there and what will I do? This is not possible. I said, Prasad, don't worry, I will help you out. So I called the pension office. They said, sir, don't worry at all. He can come on WhatsApp. We will verify on WhatsApp that he is alive and he can get his pension. So I thought, I have done the job for Prasad. Prasad will be happy. But Prasad was furious. He said, when this thing was available for past 10 years, why did they make me run to that office for 10 years? The point I'm making here is that there are many things which are available in the environment as of now, but it is the human behavior which drives what is going to happen and how things are going to shape up. So when we talk about leadership in this volatile world, we exhibit leadership when we need it the most. And whatever technological advancements are happening, and you started this panel discussion that we are going to talk about Gen AI. Suit them, not just because Gen AI is there. So I will stop my comment here for the discussion, for you to take forward the discussion.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Again, I mean, I'm hearing the same things Dr. Partha said, that things are changing and every individual is a leader, right? So let us hear from Dr. Bill Rothwell. Dr. Bill Rothwell, if you could tell us the art of influencing people without authority, right? Because as Dr. Partha is saying, that every individual today is powerful. He or she has got their own skill set, capabilities. We don't have the command and control culture which was there back in 80s, right? So uh, so in today's day and age, wherein people have their own share of ego, their own share of attitude, right, and shenanigans, uh, I as a leader, how do I make sure that I influence the people in my organization, and do it without authority? And mind you, we are not talking about organizations like NASA, wherein the organizations are more driven by vision. We're talking about organization which are more sort of services based, or wherein the roles are not very highly vision driven. Bill, you're on mute.
I'd start out by saying that the theories of leadership are quite advanced. We hear about servant leadership and complexity leadership and many others, but the reality is that leadership in today's organizations are still stuck in the 1950s, if not before. And I see this at a university where you would think the most advanced management theories and leadership theories would be eagerly applied. But instead, we see the exact opposite of that. We see an intensification of a bureaucratic, authoritarian, autocratic approach to leadership, and then concerns by those leaders about what they regard as resistance to change, which in reality is largely driven by their approach to how they want to go about engineering change processes. So I think, to answer your question, Shabazz, that when we talk about leadership, it all starts with the willingness to set an example and to live what you espouse. Of course, we've all heard the quote often attributed to Mahatma Gandhi, but that he actually never said in so many words, and that is, you should be what you should be the change you wish to see in the world. Well, that is wisdom. But the reality is most leaders in organizations today learn leadership by observing other people. I'm a strong believer in social learning theory, which states that to learn management or leadership, you don't learn it in the university. You don't learn it in training courses. You learn it by watching other people. And if you are given good role models to imitate and they give you feedback on your behavior is shaped accordingly. But if you are given bad examples, and I think there are plenty of those, then we end up with a future leadership that imitates the bad examples that they have been given exposure to. I used to run a high potential program in a multinational company, and we were very selective about the managers that we assigned our high potentials to, because we wanted them to be given the very best examples of leadership behavior to model. We did not want to assign them to authoritarians, to people who were so arrogant they would not listen to anyone. And there are plenty of people out there like that. So we were very selective. We used objective methods to select those people, the people they were to model, and we used objective methods to select the high potentials. And then we put the high potentials with the people we knew would demonstrate the best behaviors that we wanted them to imitate in the future. So that's how I would answer your question. The first thing is find people who are good role models. The second thing is find people who encourage creative and critical thinking, even to the point that they challenge their boss or their direct superior and question everything that their boss asks them to do, and doesn't just criticize it, but is willing to come up with better approaches. So when I ran a department, people would come to me and they'd say, "Oh, boss, there's a problem." And I'd say, "Well, tell me about it." And they would. And then I would say, "Well, what is your solution to that problem?" And I would try to draw them out and get them to think about the problem rather than delegate everything up to me. I did not get off on the power trip that some leaders do of being able to call all the shots. In fact, I was focused on trying to develop their thinking by using the Socratic approach of questioning everything they said and then get them to think it out on their own. And that's why I got compliments from my people. They said, "Your department has an exemplary record of getting people promoted. And this is why people would want to come to me as their boss, because I had a track record of people reporting to me who got big promotions." So
Excellent. Thank you for sharing these insights, and I love the Socratic approach. On that note, let me again go to Dr. Partha and ask, so in our VUCA world, what specific tools or frameworks can leaders use to anticipate potential disruptions and also prepare their organizations?
Well, as Professor Rothwell did indicate, there are indeed a lot of tools, a lot of models, a lot of theories. So the question is, how do we apply those theories in a fashion that really gets embedded in the DNA of the organization? Now, in my humble ways, I worked with companies around 36 countries, and I've seen that the way you will do it is very country specific or culture specific. Like when I talk to my Japanese clients, I don't have to talk about humility. I don't have to talk about being people-oriented because they are very relationship-oriented. There I talk about being decisive. So the theories of decision science and theory of leadership from the point of view, Japanese are very good in building consensus, but they take too much time. So there the focus is speed and how to use the tools like AI, as Harjit was talking about, and similar technologies to speed up decision making, speed up the leadership behavior. But the essentials are very good in Japan because it's consensus, it's respect for people, it's humility, the ego factor is much low. But if I go to India, where I've done also a significant amount of work, Harjit, you will be happy to know I had the privilege to have discussion with Dhirubhai Ambani, and I was introduced to Mukesh and Anil by Dhirubhai. I'm talking about 1980s. Interestingly enough, who built up the Reliance, a humble man, but confidence, but he has a tremendous foresight. He said, my biggest challenge would be management of egos in my company. Now, he noticed that. And I must say, with my due respect to Harjit, most of the companies in India at the topmost level, they suffer from ego. So I think the tool would be interesting what is available in India, which is Vedic philosophy. And Vedic philosophy talks about get rid of your ego, bring in this develop your inner conscience to serve others. So a country which 5,000 years ago made these statements is a country which has been suffering from egos. There again comes the question, how do you do the social engineering at the top of the pyramid so the pyramid gets inverted and the people at the base, which is now become at the top, gets respected. So that would be another model which I have talked about, which is inverting the pyramid from purely from philosophical and emotional point of view. Now, when I come to the United States versus Germany, there's a difference, but let me talk about the US, otherwise it will take too much time. I feel there is a genuine desire. That's why business schools are there. I want to learn. But then I feel because of the influence of, I would say, Adam Smith, which is power of self-interest, and influence of Charles Darwin, survival of the fittest, if you merge the two, just think about it, you merge the two, it is obviously about me, self. In the process, that force is so strong that in spite of people appreciating the theories, we have HR department, we have diversity officer, we have inclusivity officer, we have all kinds of parameter. But as Professor Rothwell was saying, even universities have become even more hierarchical. So I do not have an answer to that, but I think we have to have such meetings more often. We should get the CEOs joining such meetings so that they get a chance to reflect. And of course, we have to also make universities the example. I mean, Professor Rothwell, you're so right. Universities are the fountainhead of ideas, but in the universities themselves, I'm connected with three of them, MIT, Harvard, and Tufts. I see the hierarchy at work, as you are observing. So what are we achieving? I have a big question mark. And again, I take the blame because I've been consulting for the last 4 decades, and it has not been easy ride. If I really step back and think about it, did I make a difference? But then I have to end with Mahatma Gandhi, be the change yourself. So that's what I'm trying. So I think, Sabaz, we have the tools. In short, I will say we have the tools. Tools have to be applied differently in different cultures, and the work is going to be hard. And that's why such conference is so important.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. Let me shift gears a little bit and come to learning and development. And Kristen, I'd be really delighted if you can share with us how can organizations foster a culture of continuous learning and development to future-proof their workforce? I mean, what tangible steps can leaders take to demonstrate growth mindset and adaptable behavior, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, in my experience, I have yet to come across a person, an example, or a situation where innovation didn't require risk. And if we are requesting that people take risks in order to pursue a new way of doing things or pushing the edge, then we need to have an organizational culture that supports mistake making. We don't have that, we're not going to innovate because we're not going to feel safe to do so. So when I think about, organizations being responsive to fostering a culture of innovation, the precursor to that is fostering a culture where, as Dr. Rothwell said, being able to ask questions and challenge your direct leader is an uncomfortable and extremely vulnerable experience for the majority of people. And we can't make the assumption that just because we request people to do that, that they are automatically going to do that if the rest of the culture doesn't support that type of behavior. If we witness other people participating in risk-taking behaviors that are interpersonally vulnerable and challenging and getting squashed for it, the odds of us doing that ourselves are slim to none. If I witness my colleague get reprimanded for challenging or asking a question in pursuit of creativity and agility and innovation, the odds of me wanting to be agile or innovative or creative at risk of being squashed in front of other people is probably not that high. So that goes back to our pretty core understanding of what psychological safety is within teams. And I think the shift is that psychological safety is not between me and you, it's between me and us. It is everybody. It is vicariously experienced both positively and negatively. So if we want to talk about innovative culture, I think we first have to talk about what type of behaviors are actually encouraged and supported when innovation doesn't go well. It's great when it does, but we don't remember those things. We remember the times when it didn't go well and we were personally impacted or we witnessed others be personally impacted by that. So it's probably not a particularly popular view to say you actually have to focus on what you're going to do when you're not so agile or when you're not so responsive or creative or innovative in order to create the conditions which actually permit those behaviors in the first place.
Excellent. Thank
And
you for
Shamas, I would like to
yeah,
make one
please,
point.
please.
Kirsten has really laid out a beautiful, I would say, backdrop to make a very important point. When you see organizations which are talking about culture, and often again, the top would say we need a cultural change, but the top doesn't change. So I think we have to think of mechanisms where we could bring change in the boardroom, because typically boards are chosen. If you look at how the boardrooms are chosen, people bring their friends. It depends upon who you know as opposed to the knowledge that they might bring. And in the process, I feel the boards of most of the companies are highly compromised. It is just names. Because I was the CEO of XYZ, I gained qualification. But when the world is looking for something totally different, we are still relying on know who as opposed to know how. And I think that's where I think we have to bring the change as well.
So just a quick follow-up question to both of you. While creating that culture of openness, how do we make sure that there is a balance to ensure that people don't go hayway, right? Because if we give too much freedom, we might not be able to focus on the business objective. So I'd just love to hear your perspective on that, Dr. Partha and Kristen, from you as well.
Yeah, I have a pretty strong point of view. The reason is, is the moment of the past. As I become a CEO of the company, I have perhaps appreciated CEOs who were 20 years senior to me, and people who were 20 years senior to me, they appreciated someone 20 years senior to me. As we're talking, people learn from models. Now, the model has been hierarchical, and that culture continues. I've seen Google, even Google has become a very hierarchical company. It used to be an organization which was networked, but now I understand it's very, very difficult to get in touch with Sundar Pichai. Now, Sundar, as you know, went to my IIT, but he has become highly inaccessible. Why? But that is not true, by the way. When Bill Gates was running Microsoft, I met him in 1980s. I could send him an email, I would expect an answer from him within 2-3 days. So I personally feel that at the highest levels in organization, there has to be a movement where they could truly celebrate what I often say, with egos outside and divine within, possibilities are limitless. And that spirit we have to bring to play. And unfortunately, as companies become big, they tend to become egocentric. People at the top feel they are the bosses, they know everything, they have answers to every question. And unfortunately, a lot of young people as a result are disenchanted with large organizations. They're lost. I'm not surprised what's going on in the universities right now. It may be the cause is what's happening in the Middle East, but there's a fundamental level, there's an anger that people are not being able to appreciate the models that they're seeing in universities, as Professor Rothwell was talking about, in companies. And I think we need, that's why I began the Leadership Academy. We need a leadership movement of the fundamental kind. And the last point I want to make, though, which is a very important point, I think, as I mentioned earlier, we are product of the Cartesian model. If you look at how CEOs are incentivized, if the stock prices go up, you will get so many stocks at strike rate of certain price, which is negotiated. But why do I have to compensate a CEO on the basis of stock price? I think he should be compensated on building a great organization, becoming the flagship of the country, like General Motors used to be. But why, if I am the chairman of GM, why I don't need those incentives? The incentive is I have gotten the responsibility to run a company like GM. I'm okay with $500,000. Why do I need $50 million? Maybe I'm okay. I'll be okay with $100,000. At that time, by that level, I've got enough assets, which is my reputation, and I want to end my career by building a greater company. And that's the opportunity given to the chairman of General Motors or GE or Google. But I feel this whole concept of, I would use a very strong word, that I have to bribe someone to build up the stock price, is a wrong way of thinking about compensation. And that's why you see the gap has increased between the CEO and the person entering. So I am talking about fundamentals, my friend, and I think we have to begin this movement.
Hey, Shabazz, can I jump in here? Because I am dying to follow up on what Partha just said. And sorry, Kirsten, I kind of jumped on you there, but
Go for it.
I think that was
Professor Rothwell wanted to say, yeah.
Yeah, I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry. I didn't follow the conventions. But that was Partha. That was so true. And you're going to get the teams person from me. Your team is your customer. You know, you're talking about the inverted pyramid. You're talking about what is a leader, a true leader at all levels of the organization, like we heard from Bill and Harjeet. What is their job? And to me, if you're a leader in an organization and you're not supporting and developing your team, then you are failing at your job. That's what leaders do. It's developing and supporting others. So the team is the customer. So Bill, I jumped on Bill and Kirsten, so I'm going to jump out now.
If I can jump in 30 seconds.
What I'm going to say, and I can say it quickly, there was a study done by University of Pennsylvania where they compared company success as measured by various balanced scorecard measures with the current incentive system for CEOs, and they actually found an inverse relationship between the current way CEOs are incentivized and company performance on several different levels, like the balanced scorecard indicates. So I'm just supporting what Partha said.
Yeah. 30 seconds. I want to take what Partha said originally about top down, what Kirsten said about taking risks and watching people get squashed when they stick their neck out, and the idea of ego. And relate this to the model that Tim and I have developed around this meaningful partnership, the mutuality between a manager and a team, a signed behavioral contract between the two, which is developed as a result of the team saying, hey, boss, this is what we need from you in order for us to feel supported and be successful. And the manager also developing something similar to that, and then exchanged and signed. And so the manager has that input from the team has that input from the manager. What do we mutually need from each other to feel supported and be successful? So our unit of analysis is really in the middle, thinking that it's hard to change culture at the top. That takes a lot, and is often not that successful. Let's start where we can make a difference, which is in the middle at the team level, that relationship between any manager and his or her team, and just outline, here are the ground rules we agree to live by, accept feedback on, and navigate our relationship and make micro adjustments as possible. And it doesn't fix everything, but I do think it keeps ego in check. I think it takes a lot of the risk out of innovation, and it ensures that the manager is more accountable, maybe not completely, but much more accountable to their own team. So that's what I wanted to add.
Well, it's really going to get more exciting as we progress ahead. But yeah, Kristen, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, I think the only thing I'll touch on, Shabazz, was part of your question was, how do we balance with not giving people too much freedom?
Yeah.
And I would say that's not actually a problem, because the structure of a vertical organizational hierarchy is often the antithesis to freedom and autonomy. So I don't think we're running that risk in most organizations. The idea that we can give people too much in their roles, I have not seen that play out. I find the more that we give our people in terms of space and capacity and encouragement and freedom and autonomy to be that creative, innovative self, has yet to backfire in people taking too much. If you've got a strong leader who can embrace and cultivate and support those practices and behaviors, I think you're okay.
On that note, something comes to my mind is holacracy, right? If you would have in your consulting assignments, if you would have seen some examples where this kind of culture has really given good results, and if you could share that with us, that'll be really great.
I think if we look to any, and I'm going to pull from Tim and Seth, not companies, but teams. If we look to any team that has accomplished these types of behaviors and led to outcomes that they would not have otherwise observed, I think the proof is sort of in the pudding. Like and as all the panelists have shared so far, we've got the research, we've got the knowledge, we've got the frameworks and the models. It's when those actually move from a hypothesis to application is when we see that most effectively executed, and at the team level. And that's not unique to any particular industry. I primarily come from a healthcare background, and when we experiment with those types of practices in teams where there's time-sensitive decision-making, it is high pressure, and one of the only industries that we can truly say life or death decision-making, that's when we see better outcomes for patients, better outcomes for families, better outcomes for systems. And that typically happens at the team level. I almost see that as a little bit of a transition, pivoting from pilot to program. We're really good at experimenting in tiny sections. How can we scale that to other teams within the organization, which then ultimately shifts where the organization is going?
Well, since you called me out, Kirsten, which is fine. You're talking at the team level, and one of the things when we're talking about changing culture, it's a lot easier to change the culture at the team level than at the organization level, because as we've heard so many times, the senior people, and I hesitate to use bad leadership because I think the term bad leadership doesn't say what leadership is. Leadership is good. So you have good leaders and not leaders. You have administrators and senior administrators, not senior leaders. And a lot of times we use that senior leadership term incorrectly because they're not leaders. They're administrators. But at a team level, I've seen it so many times where you can what? Bureaucrat.
They're
Yes.
bureaucrat.
Yeah. And so we can at a team level change the culture. And I know Seth, I don't want to speak for my friend Seth, but at the team level, we can change that culture really quickly. And somewhere like one of the red books right up there above my fingers is Jim Collins' Good to Great. Sorry, not our Meaningful Partnership book, but that is above my shoulders too. But no, Good to Great. And that's what we're talking about, is how can we take teams that are good and make them great? And I see that all the time in these simple culture change processes where the team has voice, where the team can make change, where the term you used, which is so important to me, psychological safety, where people feel the ability to make mistakes or say something that's not popular, and they're not going to be punished for it. At the team level, we can make those cultural changes really easy. So yes, I agree with you, Kirsten. It's at the team level, it happens all the time. It's changing that command and control hierarchy that Partha started talking about at the beginning. That is so, how do we change that from the bottom up? Harvard, Harvard, um, they had an article years ago that's still one of my favorites. It was How to Manage Your Boss. And it still is a process that so many people struggle with, because we've got bosses who aren't doing the things we need to feel supported in order to be successful. That inverted pyramid. The team is your customer. I can't stress that enough. So thank you for asking that.
While we are discussing about the organizational culture, one thing that comes to my mind is, and I would like to pull Harjeet, Dr. Partha, and Dr. Bill over here. I mean, I've seen in organizations, every organization have their own HRMS, and they have their own set of OKRs and defined goals, and all these sort of set practices, right? But then I'm really confused. So as to why are these organizations suffering to bring the best out of their people?
Harjit
Oh, a
would
lot
be
of
perfect person to answer. Harjit, you go ahead.
Look, let me put a thought on leadership. If you see, when we say leadership, basically anyone who can take the humanity forward is a leader. And then you apply the same thing to organizations, any organization which can change the culture, the way people behave, that organization becomes a leader. And within that organization, who are the people who are actually driving that change for organization to become the same, become that organization? I will give you example of, say, Apple. When Steve Jobs joined Apple for the second time, at that time, the structure of Apple was a divisional structure. Like most of the FMCG companies work in the BU structure, it had a BU structure. When Steve Jobs came, he was not looking for a job. That, okay, I will come here and I will join the company, and the way company is running, I am going to run the company in the same manner. First thing he did after joining was he dissolved that structure. He said, this is the structure which is killing this organization. This is not what I want to do with this organization. He created a functional structure. He said, we are not a cola company which is going to run in this manner, that I have created a product and I am going to sell that product and how much money I can make out of that product. He said, I want to innovate. This organization is about innovation. The power has to be with functional people who can actually work on creating a product which is world class. And if you see, everyone at that point in time called that this is a mistake, because that is not how organizations run. Organizations run in a prosperous manner in a BU structure. And after 20 years, the valuation of Apple was almost 40 times of when Steve Jobs joined the organization. Now that one person came into the organization and made that organization great because it created something which all of us love to use. He understood what is that people would want to have. The leadership comes with that vision, that what is the vision you have for your customers. Like Partha was saying that we are looking at the stock market. If we start looking at our customers and the potential needs of those customers, and then take people along, that this is what we are going to create for this world. Are you with me? Rest everything becomes sorted. You talk about innovation, you talk about taking care of your team, that comes automatically. Because you are talking about doing something which no one has done before. And to me, that is something which is very, very important. If you are having a vision and if you are trying to work towards that vision, and that vision is something which is going to make a difference to the society. This is also Japanese culture, which Partha was talking about, whether you are adding value to the society or not. That is why you do business. You don't do business for making money. Money is just a measure of how much value you are adding to the society.
Very well said.
Now, if you are committed to your vision and the people you have brought on board are committed to that vision, and that is the most difficult thing, then the question which you asked gets answered automatically. I can give you a model for that, but I don't want to go there. So I will stop here and would like to hear from others.
Bill, you want to go, or
Let William, Professor Rothwell, after that I will.
All I was going to say is that to agree with what Arjit was saying, and I agree fully with his comments. But what we see too often from leaders is the exact opposite. They become frightened by external events, and that means they tighten up the bureaucracy. They put more procedures and more rules in place, and that stifles innovation and a willingness to take risks. And I was going to add that at the university, what strikes me as really strange is that we have a tenure system, at least in some countries, where people who have tenure are supposed to be relatively protected from being fired because of what they say or do. But in recent years, due to cancel culture and due to the increasing monetization of the academic world, we see less and less willingness of even tenured faculty to speak up and confront their leaders when they know what their leaders are suggesting is wrong, or they simply want to ask why certain decisions are being made. And I've served on a number of academic committees, and you'll find it interesting that I get text messages when we're on a Zoom call in an academic meeting with the dean or with some higher official of the university, and I'm getting text messages from other tenured professors asking me to ask questions. They don't want to put their hand up and challenge the leadership. And why do they ask me to do it? Because they know I'm past retirement age. They know I'm independently wealthy. And I'm already a distinguished full professor with tenure. So there is absolutely nothing the dean can take away from me or president, except maybe the pathetically small pay raise that we are given each year, which usually amounts to 2% or less, which is far below the inflation rate. So my point is, why is that? And I'm circling back to Kirsten's comment, I agree with her completely, that for good leadership, we have to have leaders who are willing to foster an environment where people feel comfortable to raise difficult questions. But instead, we're headed the opposite direction, in my opinion. We see less willingness to put your hand up, and this also happens in public venues. You'll find it interesting that I frequently write letters to the editor, and I have a whole team of people who volunteered to help me get my letters posted to numerous newspapers in the US because they are afraid to write their own letters to the editor. So I will write letters that question what's going on, and then these other people will help me get those letters published. You see what I'm saying? It's the same effect that I experience in the academic world, where tenured professors come to me to ask questions for them because they are fearful of the taking responsibility for the difficult questions they're asking to powerful people. And the same is true with public letters to the editor. There are a lot of people who are concerned about what's happening in the US, and they don't want to speak up and have their names associated with those viewpoints. But when they find somebody like me who is willing to speak up, then behind the scenes, they're supporting what I am writing. And so I don't know if Kirsten has a follow-up to that. I'm simply supporting what she says. I think we have to have leaders who are willing to create a culture and a climate where people feel comfortable to ask those difficult questions. And I don't know how we can have innovation without that.
So I'd like to go a step deeper based on what Kirsten, Harjeet, and William shared. We all recognize there's a problem, that we have hundreds of books on leadership, 400 books on HR, but particularly what William is talking about, universities which are supposed to be the fountainhead of ideas, fountainhead of breakthroughs, they are becoming more bureaucratic and more quote unquote administrative, where we are cultivating fear. But Tagore is to say, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, then only we create a great society. So we are just moving in the opposite direction vis-a-vis where we should go. So the question is why? The first, and how to rectify, I've got some thoughts. The why is that people have become, in the world of uncertainty, significantly more uncertain about themselves. Uncertainty breeds fear, and fear obviously leads to compromised thought processes, because you do not want to say things which you want to say. You want to sugarcoat it or have Professor Rothwell write the note which I should have written. So obviously that's dangerous. I mean, what you're seeing is very serious, is dangerous. Now in Japan, we talked about Japan earlier, that to become the CEO of a company, he has to demonstrate that he has been a successful head of HR. Only when you run the HR properly, or try to create the culture of Kaizen, the culture of continuous improvement, then only you can qualify to become the CEO. But the United States, I don't know how it is in India, Harjit, but typically HR position is considered a necessary, but not given as much importance as the CFO is given. CFO enjoys significantly more stature Please excuse me if I'm hurting your positioning, compared to the position of a HR head. There may be some exception, but most of the cases. And if we can reverse that HR head is the most important person who reports to the CEO, and he is the one who ultimately qualifies to be the CEO, then we have made a statement. That could be one point perhaps we could rally around. The second point, which is interesting to me, that even within the HR, in an organization, they are looked at as organization which manage the discipline of organization, the payroll, with the evaluations done in the right time, or these days people talk about gender gaps, diversity, inclusiveness. It has become an administrative role as opposed to a motivating role. A role of creating the new culture, the new DNA of the organization. So I think the HR itself has to be redefined. HR drives the innovative spirit, the culture of the future of the company. And that's the role of the HR. Payroll and disciplining should be a very small component. So that's the second suggestion I would like to make, Arjit. And third, I will tell you, Arjit, which is I've seen particularly in India, if I write a proposal as a consultant, one is very Cartesian in nature, that I'll help you to make this investment, which would lead to this kind of return. Versus if I say, as Kristen was talking about, and Harjit, you talked about also, that I will create a culture which will be more innovative, it will take time. The second proposal will be kept aside. No, Partha, it's not the right time. It's never the right time. Oh, let's say, maybe next year, why don't you come back next year, we'll talk about it. Next year I come back, oh, it is COVID this year, no, it's not possible. So there's always a reason to postpone something which the company really needs for long-term sustainability. So I think we are dealing with some serious challenges, and I personally hope Tim and Seth and Shabazz that this conference would help us to begin a movement to wake up people, because this is serious. And this is not good because we are moving towards a black hole. And once we move into the black hole, it will be very difficult to come out. People are too happy with this. It reminds me of the Titanic. The music was going on, but while it was hitting the iceberg, the people were playing the guitar and there was people dancing on the floor while we are hitting the Titanic. And so I think it's a wake-up call is required. That would be my humble suggestion.
Very well said. We can go on and on. But in the interest of time, just let me shift gears a little bit and let me come to another interesting point, which is changing human behavior, right? We all see that the transition that has happened. So nowadays we have social media wherein we have YouTube Reels, Instagrams, and what I see is the human attention span has gone down significantly, right? And I have read research reports wherein they say that watching these YouTube shorts or Instagram reel, it gives a kind of a dopamine hit, right? And when you don't uh, Bill, like the TikTok culture, TikTok is banned here in India, so but but the thing is, and Tim, I want to come to you because you have had significant experience in industrial psychology. So what has happened is there's a lot of cognitive distortion, as we say in the technical term, right? And people have really become impatient. People have really become furious. It has affected teamwork, collaboration. So if you could help us understand how we as leaders deal with this kind of change, which has nothing to do with the economy, or is just the kind of evolution that is that is coming up.
Shabazz, this is such an important question, and I know I'm not the only one here who could answer this, and I'd love to hear from others too. But I struggle with this because, as a somebody who's older in his career, I hear people like me at times saying, "These kids today, they can't pay any attention," and it's not. Have you been to a meeting with people who are older? This thing is killing meetings. It's killing our time. It's not just the 18 to 25-year-olds, the 18 to 30-year-olds. It's everybody is glued to work now. Um, so this cognitive distortion, I think, is in part brought on by our uber connectivity. We are so connected to work, and worse, and I'm using that horrible passive voice that I would always tell my students, it is expected. It's you're expected to be on vacation and answering emails. You're expected to be answering emails. I mean, I've had students who have gone to the dean because they sent an email on Friday night and I didn't answer it by Monday morning. I wasn't on my computer. So I think part of the problem is this uber connectivity we have. We have laptops, we have iPads, we have cell phones, and everything is connected. And here I am. I'm saying it's not the younger generation. In fact, I'm going to say the younger generation is going to change this. They are used to this uber connectivity and they are pushing back. They want more balance. And Bill, when we were chatting at the beginning before we started, you were talking about, people are changing jobs more rapidly now, especially people newer in their career. And it's in part because of the expectations that are being imposed on them, and they are looking not for um, that salary, but they are more looking for balance in their life, and so many people are just not willing to see that. So to me, part of the problem we're running into right now is this uber connectivity we have, Shabazz, to answer your question. It's that um, everybody is connected 24/7, and worse, expected to answer 24/7. And that's a really hard life to have. And I'm gonna speak for me. Like, I choose which nights to bring my laptop home now. There are nights I don't bring my laptop home, so I am disconnected. It's actually a cognitive choice. Um, I think we have to focus on being more mindful. We talk about mindfulness at home, but I think we have to be focused on mindfulness at work too, being present in the moment, being present for the people who we report to and who report to us. Our relationships at work, and Seth, if you want to talk about that Harvard study that's been going on for years, our relationships at work are the most important thing. People are not at work for necessarily just a paycheck. The paycheck is important, but it's those relationship, that part of work, that is absolutely essential.
Yeah,
Just
you
maybe
referenced the
just to,
Harvard study. It started in 1938 and was looking at what makes people happy. And the quick conclusion over 70 years of continuous longitudinal research is its relationships, the big ones in our life, the personal ones, as well as the professional ones and the smaller ones. I would just build quickly on what Tim said. There's a great book out called The Anxious Generation, which has looked from a research standpoint globally around the use of the phones and how really in 2010, suicide and suicide ideation among teenagers went up precipitously because prior to that, most people had the flip phones. And so the author talks about a play-based childhood versus a phone-based childhood. And for time immemorial, prior to 2010, all kids went out on the street and played hockey or ball or soccer or whatever they did. Now they sit in their rooms and and they send Instagrams. And it has reduced the level of EQ and social skills and coping skills. And so just to bring it to our conversation, I wonder the incoming young workers to our workplaces will have these anxiety issues even more than before, will have some difficulties in making connection, taking feedback, being able to handle it, problem solve. So there is some worry that the kids who are now in their teens early 20s, come with this kind of baggage, and it's only intensifying.
So the big, Shabazz, just quick point I want to make to add some spice to your questions. If I hear it right, we are talking about there's a serious leadership deficit, point one. We did not talk about climate. There's a serious climate challenge. There's a wealth gap, and there's a geopolitical disorder around the world, which are very complex problems, needs long-term thinking. But on the other side, the way the social media is affecting our lifestyle, our ability to immerse into a longer term thinking is declining, and our span of attention is really falling short. So, which means we are at a very difficult point in our development of civilization. There's a fundamental disconnect in terms of how our mind should work, immersing into long-term situation, being able to meditate and think of some breakthroughs. But the media is helping us to become more and more short-term. And no wonder the CFO and the CEO, they want to see every day your profit is higher than the previous day at the cost of sacrificing what HR would like to do. That's the challenge. Please go ahead.
Thank you for sharing those insights, Dr. Partha. Let me come to Seth and understand, like, what role does empathy play in effective leadership, particularly in these times of crisis or uncertainty, right? And if you could help us understand, like, beyond composure, what are the key skills and mindsets that leaders need to effectively develop to kind of deal with such situations, we would be really grateful.
Well, I'll build a little bit on what Bill started with when we kicked off the session regarding the models that are out there: servant leadership and transformational leadership and complexity leadership and VUCA leadership. What is a hot topic these days is humility and empathy, and the notion that leaders can be open. It's that sort of Zen firmness, decisiveness, confidence, at the same time, humility, openness, flexibility, and willingness to admit fault and wrong, and therefore empower. So it is that balance, that level 5, I guess, Tim, that is talked about in Good to Great. So no question, empathy is critical to that. In our model, we talk about it as the first element in creating great partnership, that you've got to have empathy for the other side's interests, their background, their goals, what do they care about, what's their emotional state. From there, you can get to respect and trust and alignment and cooperation and collegiality. So I would agree with that. Tim, do you want to build on that?
Before we go to Tim, Seth, could you also, actually, I was reading this in your book, like it said something like ERTAP, the ERTAP model, right? Could you just, it'll be really beneficial for our audience.
Sure. Well, we believe that if you will, the soil in which great partnership, and of course, partnership is at all levels in every organization, whether it's manager and team to team, individual to individual, company to company even to customer, is the ERTAP idea. And that stands for empathy, mutuality, understanding feelings and goals and interests, respect, mutual respect, and the dignity that comes with that. T is trust, and then A is alignment, and then finally partnership. So these elements are absolutely required in order to have exceptional, or what we call meaningful, partnership between any two parties. And just back to empathy, I mean, I love the Stephen Covey phrase, empathy leads to synergy. If you're going to get to synergy and cooperation, it does start with empathy.
Yeah. So Seth, you asked me if I had anything to add, and I'm actually going to change it a little bit. So, because when we think about empathy in leadership, and Bill just wrote into the chat, it's so we don't see it often today, empathy in leadership, unfortunately, but it is so essential. And what we're talking about here is what it means to, in general, across all of us, what does it mean to be a leader? And I just want to do a thought experiment for people, and we can't really get the answers other than in the chat, but when you think about the best leader that you have had, what are the attributes that made that person the best leader? And feel free to type them in the chat if you want to, but really it's a thought experiment, because I'm going to let people think and chat if they want to, but I'm actually going to answer some of this in the negative. It's not that they were at the top of the hierarchy. It's not that these are things we've heard already today, that they increased the stock price. It's not that they shut people down and didn't make them feel comfortable and safe to innovate. That is not the kinds of things you will ever hear. It's not that they did their performance reviews well. Oh, I had a good performance review. That's what I remember from my best leader. These are not the things we're going to hear. So I'm seeing a lot of things pop up in the chat now. This is great. It's what's a great leader? It's people who partner with others. It's people who have empathy for you, who understand your way of doing things, who help to develop you, who help to bring you along, who helped you to become a better person, who gave you that developmental and positive feedback, something that's also lacking today. So I've talked too long. I'm going to
Yeah, I would throw in the word humility too. Harjeet touched on it earlier as well. There has to be a basic humility that goes with the empathy. And all these are high level people skills, aren't they? These are all EQ attributes. So to build on what you're saying, Tim, the greatest leaders we've had in our own personal experience were not the ones who managed projects and came in on time, on budget. They were the ones who listened and cared and were open and were able to say, I'm sorry, and then also had vision. I mean, I love what Partha said earlier, that there has to be a compelling vision. They were able to articulate it or help the team develop it and then move forward with that vision.
Well, we could go on and on, but I'm so sorry, panelists. In the interest of time, we'll have to cut this short. Uh, but uh, but I have something interesting. So we have a rapid fire round wherein I'll ask one question to each one of you, and you just have to answer it in one word. I know it's going to be difficult. I'm going to put all of you in spot, but let's try it. So Seth, we'll start with you. uh, which what do leaders prioritize in a fast paced world, stability or adaptability?
Stability or
Adaptability.
adaptability.
Okay. Tim, what do leaders rely on in uncertain times? Proven methods or new approaches?
proven methods, unfortunately. Oh, too many
Ex-
words.
Excellent. Okay. Next, Bill, how do leaders navigate disruptions, through control or through chaos?
I think through chaos. They're comfortable with that. They're allow that chaos to lead to new approaches.
Okay. Harjeet, to you, what does leadership encourage for innovation, risk taking or caution?
Risk taking.
Okay, that was comparatively little easy. Okay, again to you, Harjeet, what's emphasized when communicating with a remote team, clarity or flexibility?
Clarity.
Okay, thank you. Um, to you, Dr. Partha, what's crucial in times of crisis, empathy or assertiveness?
Times of crisis, I think I would say both.
Okay, I'll take that one. Um, Kristen, what do leaders value in talent development, specialized skills or versatile capabilities?
I'm gonna echo Partha and say both. It's not an either or.
Okay. Again to you, what's preferred for managing remote teams, structured process or flexible workflows? And again, this will be to Harjeet as well, to both of you.
What are the options again? Structured.
Structured processes or flexible workflows?
Neither.
Okay. Harjeet,
I can tell you a story. I will not give a one-word answer now.
okay, go ahead.
Look, there was a chaos at the airport, and everyone wanted to get inside the airplane. And there was a lady which was like 5'1", 5'2". She was trying to manage 300 people who wanted to get inside the airport. And I was thinking how she is going to manage the chaos. Then suddenly she came up. She had a structure. She said, first we will onboard zone 1 passengers, then zone 2, then zone 3. This is the line for zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. The whole chaos was gone. If you provide methods or frameworks to your people to manage chaos, then things become a lot more easier.
Okay, that was really wonderful. With this, unfortunately, we are coming towards the end of the panel, and I'd love to call upon some questions from the audience. So if someone in the audience has any specific questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll unmute you, and you can go ahead and ask the question to our panelists. Well, let me check.
Shabazz, they can put them in the chat too
Yeah,
if they
yeah.
want,
You can also
correct?
put them in the chat box.
I thought we were
So,
discussing among ourselves only.
uh, so, uh, so one thing that is that was mentioned some time ago is like what are some of the key considerations for leaders when navigating geopolitical and economic uncertainties? So maybe
I could take-
yeah.
Yeah, I think the first is I feel there has to be truly a genuine conscience and empathy. I would use the word again on a global scale to understand the political forces from both angles. I think we typically get biased and look at problems from one angle. But as a CEO of a company, if I'm running a company or if I'm a president of a country, I think it's important that we have a full perspective of the problem so that we could take a position which is a truly genuine solution. We have to go to the roots of the problems, root causes, and then come up with root solutions. Today, I feel we are just being very superficial. We are touching on the surface without doing the proper homework. And in the process, one problem leads to another problem. I mean, geopolitically, as you know, the world is a tremendous crisis all the way from North Korea, South China Sea, Rohingya crisis, Pakistan, India crisis, Middle East, Ukraine, Russia, you name it. Even in the United States, democracy is being challenged. So obviously, it's very important that we understand why and then try to address the basics, the fundamentals, not cosmetic. I mean, and one of the reasons we had this discussion, there are books, but the companies have made cosmetic changes. They've not made fundamental changes. And we cannot afford to do that anymore.
Bill, we would love to hear your perspective as well.
What was your question again? Please repeat it.
So, what are the key considerations for leaders when navigating geopolitical and economic uncertainties?
I think they absolutely must not only be more creative themselves, but find ways to encourage innovation and creativity among their workers, including building a corporate culture that supports that innovation. But too often it is the opposite. They use control methods. They think by cracking down on spending, on productivity, measurement, by doing all of that, that somehow that will lead to greater certainty in dealing with those dynamic challenges that they see happening in the world. Another thing that I'm thinking of, I've got a new book coming out on this. Traditionally, when a change happens in the world, we tend to play victim. We think that we have to adapt to it. But what if we flip that and say, how could we change what's going on in the outside world? So I came to that conclusion from the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I wrote a book on how to set up and implement a program in a company. But then the next book focused on how could we flip what's going on inside a company and take it outside the organization and move beyond corporate social responsibility into social change and social activism. What is the role of every organization in making the world a better place? How can we get business leaders to think of that? And I think that Disney, Ron DeSantis problem is a good example of how that can play out on a political level. And that story is still not finished. I'm betting my money on Disney because they've got the
Bill?
money and the power.
So let me respectfully, not challenge, but just sort of inquire further on that. So the notion that employees might have strong feelings about climate or about the Middle East. We know Google, I think it was Google, fired a number of protesting employees who had strong opinions about the Middle East conflict. To what extent do you manage the diversity of opinion within an organization? Do you allow employees to voice their views about ethical spending or their political thoughts around how the company invests its time or where it chooses to do business? That would seem on the surface to be a slippery slope and not one where consensus is easily achieved and distracting from the business.
Yeah, it's never easy, but then to what extent is a business a victim or simply focuses on money making while the country they're part of or the world they're part of is going up in flames? Should they ignore that and just focus on money making? But I agree with you, Seth, and I think that's the next generation of the field we call organization development, which focuses on humanistic change in organizations. I think the next step is trans-organization development, where we start looking at how we can institute positive change in an increasingly negative world.
Yeah,
So I'm not saying I have the answer.
Let me respond. Sorry.
Yeah,
Let me respond to your question. It's a very good question. I feel a great leader is one which could encourage freedom of ideas to ferment, point number one. Not to reject ideas, but the great leader is also one which can find enlightened synergies between ideas as opposed to rejecting ideas. So what we are talking about, the leadership in the 21st century has to be egoless, allow freedom of expression, integrate ideas as much as they may be different. And that's where the quality of leadership has to be significantly enhanced, spiritually much more developed, so that you could indeed bring multiple thoughts together. I think that's what I think the leadership of the 21st century has to be like. Not the leadership of the 20th century where everything is rigid, is my way or the highway. If it's not my way, you're fired. If it's highway, we'll find a highway for you. That is, I think, which is limiting the world. The other point I wanted to make response to what William was talking about earlier. If you look at the hollowing of United States manufacturing, because United States played victim when the German and the Japanese automotive companies started taking over the market here in the US, as opposed to what we could have raised, how do we increase our competitiveness?
Yes.
Not exactly how to produce products which are high quality. And now this has happened with China. We are always playing victim, and the other part of the world is taking over. They're taking over because they're productive. They're producing products which are high quality. And how China manages its government and markets is none of my business. My business is how to manage US markets and US companies in a way that they are competitive. We're always playing victim. I'm so glad you made that point, Professor Rothwell, and said that we play the victim role too strong, and that's absolutely diminishes what enlightened leadership means. We have heard it so many times from Lee Iacocca and we have celebrated such people, to Jack Welch. But what did Jack Welch do to the United States? Jack Welch started out putting plants outside, buy it from outside. In the process, GE, which is to be a flagship of manufacturing, got hollowed out. But people wrote books on Jack Welch. Jack Welch became a big hero. So this goes to show the short-termism is creating a black hole, which is destroying not only the United States, because people look up to US, people read books coming out of the US, universities. But the point is, US has failed to become a model for the world.
Yeah, I agree with that. And after my 83 trips to China, the one thing I came to respect about the Chinese was that they were very interested in listening to foreign experts, give them ideas, and then they would leverage those ideas to advantage. But the US traditionally has been too goddamn arrogant to do that.
Absolutely. And I see, unfortunately, I see that a little bit in India, whatever Chinese people they're coming in. But the point is, Chinese companies are producing product more competitive, which Indian companies cannot, though the manufacturing labor cost is actually cheaper. So Indian companies are not asking how to make our labor productive so that we could compete, as opposed to, again, complaining about China, as opposed to learning from China. So I think that you will see some serious shortcomings in leadership in various parts of the world.
Thank you, esteemed panelists, for sharing those insights. We have Swati Sinha, who has a question. Swati, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sure, thanks, Shabazz. Hi, hello everyone. This is Swati from India. I have a question, as in, how do you create an effective leadership in a remote setup, where social interaction happens only on a digital platform?
Oh, I can feel that. I wrote a whole book about it. Virtual Group Coaching to Improve Group Relationships is the title, and it came out during the pandemic year. And the idea is that we've got to reinvent the way we work with people, because we've reinvented the nature of that work relationship. So now we have people who work on site, people who work completely off site, and we have hybrid relationships where people float in and float out, and sometimes on an unpredictable basis. And that includes offshore people who may be from different cultures and different time zones. So the short answer to your question is we have to rethink the way we engage with people. And when we have virtual engagement with our workers, we have to make time for social interaction. When we're having it in the workplace, I can stop by your desk if I'm your boss and ask how your family is doing. I can ask if you have any work problems. But when we use virtual methods, our tendency is to draw up an agenda and then go through it the way a general tries to take a hill in the middle of a war. And that is, we go through the agenda step by step, ignore the human beings involved, and just focus on getting through the task at hand. And that's the problem. My point is, we need to rethink how we engage with people in virtual settings.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that answer. Harjeet, you want to add to that?
No, I believe you gave a
Okay.
beautiful answer.
Okay, so we're already over time, and again, as I was saying, we could go on and on, but in the interest of time, we'll have to call it a day over here. But such an insightful discussion. I mean, you know, uh, see, I have, the entire. I've taken really good notes, and
And those are
I'm.
just the ones from Seth.
Yeah. Oh, well, again, on that note, my sincere gratitude to first of all the participants for taking time out of their busy schedule. My sincere gratitude to all our esteemed panelists for committing to this. And as Dr. Partha was saying that let's see this as a stepping stone, and we should have more such discussions, and we should make a plan of action, and because as we've been discussing that we're really staying in uncertain times, and there's really need for effective leadership. So once again, thank you all of you, and I really learned a lot, and I'm really grateful to all of you, and have a good evening, and have a good day ahead. Thank you so
Shabazz,
much.
are we
Thank you
raffling the
very much.
book and Kirsten's time? Just a quick question on that.
Oh
How
yeah,
is that?
so yeah, so Swati, if you could just ping me your email ID. Okay, we panelists, do we have time for one quick question? Jonna, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jonna, you wanna unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question?
I didn't have a question. I just reacted with an applause. Thank you, though.
Okay, excellent. Okay.
And Seth,
Uh,
many of our panelists or many of our participants dropped off at 9:30. So yeah, so we don't have many of them left. 9:30, a bunch of people had to go to other things. So
Yeah. So, Jonna, on that note, we're gonna give you the book as a token of gratitude. If you could just ping your email ID, and also Swati Sinha. Yeah, she has her email ID. So Swati, we'll put you in touch with Kristen for the session, and Jonna gets the book. So with that, um, I think we're good over here. And Seth, you have any closing comments?
I just want to thank all the panelists. Wonderful that you were able to make time for this and help promote it and engage in the conversation. I learned from every one of you. I'd like to encourage that maybe we do this again in a year. Maybe we look to next spring and we market a little earlier and we pick up where we left off, because to build on Partha's initial comments, the topic is too important to let it wither on the vine, so to speak. I think we want to keep this going. I just see by the names of the participants, there's some wonderful organizations that are represented here at various levels. And perhaps they will bring their colleagues or their bosses, and this will kind of grow. So one raindrop at a time, we can influence things. And if we elevate the conversation of leadership through this group of 30 or 40, 50 people, and then next time maybe 100 people, I think that's making a positive difference. So if okay with you, we should do this again next year.
Well, just a quick thought over here. I have posted in the chat the link to the market research report that Bill has shared with us, and I've also posted the link which Harjeet has shared with us, and his publisher has been. So Harjeet has been very kind to convince his publisher to give a 15% off on his research work. So feel free to just make the most of the materials. And yeah, with that, thank you
Yeah.
again, everyone, and have a good day ahead and have a lovely evening.
All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.